Hey guys, this is Ruben Langdon, aka Dante from Devil May Cry, aka Ken Masters from Street Fighter, and also Chris Redfield from the Resident Evil series. And you are listening to the Kasanova podcast, the #1 podcast in Hawaii. Jackpot.
Yeah, I fly and I soar, but I aspire for more. Took some time so I can show you how this lion can roar. Sound the sirens, let them know I'm standing right at the door. I'm defiant, cause I know that I'm a giant at core. Yeah, I'm that boy. Let them know that I'm next level. I'm a whole new kind of guy, yeah.
All right, aloha everyone. It's Mekel Kasanova coming at you with another episode of both the Kasanova podcast and Decked Up, a Gaming and Tech podcast, because my guest today is so fucking awesome that I want to have him on both shows. So, you know what? I had a meeting with myself. I was like, self? Yes, self. Yeah, we're going to have Moses on both shows. So, anyways, welcome Moses, aka the Well Red Mage. How you doing, man?
Hey man, dude, I had a conversation with myself earlier today and I was like, how do I talk to Mekel again? And here we are talking. So I'm doing great. It's great to chat with you again.
Awesome, man. Awesome. It's also great to have a fellow Hawaiian content creator here. You know, first one I've ever had on the show. First.
What? You were my first too. You never forget your first, they say, you know?
Right?
Well, we're a rare breed. There's not like a ton of us out there. Like Joe Rogan's not Hawaiian, you know, and he's slaying in podcasting. I can't even think of any famous podcaster from Hawaii. I've met one other than yourself, who is like based in Hawaii doing a podcast. And that's it. I don't know where everybody's at as far as that goes.
And it's crazy because like there's so many people. I know we kind of touched on this when I was on your show. But like there's so many people out here that like want to do this, but there's always like that point where they're just like stopping themselves from just going full bore, or they're so focused on people here that you kind of limit your audience to just here. And even then, like people in Hawaii aren't that into tech and gaming and such. So it's like, you know, but yeah, man, first one. I'm honored to have you on.
You're honored. I'm honored. I like it. It's great to be here. Welcome to you.
I know, right? So go ahead, introduce yourself, tell people where they can find you, what you've been up to, and we will go from there. I'm gonna give you the full floor.
Oh, all right. So what have I not been up to at this stage in my life? So yeah, name's Moses, the Well Red Mage. Originally founded a website called thewellredmage.com with 3 friends, and we were like, hey, let's write about video games. And it kind of spiraled out of control. We had over 70 writers from around the world, different countries, different philosophies, and different tastes, which I really liked because it was a lot of diversity of thought. It was a lot of diversity of preference. And it was a lot of, cultural and ethnic diversity as well. So you had a lot of very different takes on a lot of very different video games. It wasn't just indie focused. It wasn't just retro focused. It wasn't just modern AAA focused. It kind of was all across the board. So that was really awesome. Unfortunately, a lot happened, like a pandemic, if you remember, kids.
Yeah.
And crowdfunding dried up. There was a lot of stress in my personal life that affected my online presence as well. And part of that was kind of finding my voice as well too. So it took a break and then we brought it back. Now it's thepixels.com, the-pixels.com. And same sort of flavor, a lot of people from around the world, a smaller team now, and trying to grow it, but also not trying to grow so fast. I found that trying to grow too fast, we encountered a lot of people who would do things like rage reviews, which I don't really care for these days. Very much in the style of AVGN and stuff like that, which like there's a time and a place for comedy. The website though is a video game critiques website, so we're treating video games as art forms, art history, that have cultural impact and cultural sensibilities to them. So there's a lot of that kind of overlaps with our philosophy there. And then as far as other things that I do, I run a podcast called MageCast X that also took a break and came back now with a new co-host. That we had Mr. Kasanova here on to talk about Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. Really enjoyed that episode, so thank you, sir. And then also streaming during weekdays at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central, focusing on completing the Super Nintendo RPG canon in the West, because people will be like, well, what about Treasure of Rudras? What about Live Alive and Bahamut Lagoon and all these things? And I was like, do you have any idea how many Super Famicom RPGs there are? Like, Mekel, if you had to pick a number out of thin air, how many Super Famicom RPGs do you think there are that never came over out of Japan?
Oh, God. I'm gonna say on a rough estimate between 150 and 300 probably.
Yeah, I lost count. I mean, it's in the hundreds. I think that was last around like 325, 330, or not 3. Whoo, that's a lot. 120 or 130. And I stopped counting because I was like, this is way too many. So just focused entirely on Super Nintendo RPGs that were released in the West. There's about 40, 45 of them, 46 of them. So that's the streaming thing. I stream off a CRT. It's not emulation. A lot of people are like, how'd you get it to look like a CRT on ZSNES? I was like, it's not ZSNES. I'm pointing a freaking camera at a freaking TV, and that's my stream. Just call it old school. So yeah, streaming, writing, doing editing. There's a YouTube channel coming. This is the first kind of podcast announcement that gets to be made for this. I don't have
screen. There you go.
There we go. Oh, I don't have a release date for this yet, but it is called. Here, we'll do some magic. It's called Gameologica. Gameologica. Now, Gameologica is an exploration of spiritual, religious, folktale, mythological, legendary motifs in video games. The reason why that came about is I have a background in religious studies. Trying to talk about those things on a podcast is really funny because you can hear the guests' eyes kind of crossing. You kind of get that like deer in the headlights kind of sound out of somebody when they're out of their depth and they don't know what they're talking about anyway, because it's a really specific thing, right? So like, right. Trying to think of a specific example, but it's eluding me. But there's stuff all over the place. Fires of Rubicon, for example, is one such that touches upon what could potentially be explored as, the relationship of an indigenous people to rapidly expanding capitalism. And there's all kinds of, folktale and legendary and religious motifs that are kind of related to that. So these are going to be micro documentaries. I envy people who are able to do, these long 8-hour documentaries on.
I don't know. I have no idea how to do it.
I do, yeah, no. Plus, I can't watch that. Like, there's just no way. I can't even sit through like a 2-hour movie without my kids like interrupting me or anything. So like, that's not going to be possible to do like a 5-hour thesis on, the Legend of Zelda and polytheism or something like that. But so yeah, micro documentaries is in around like 10 minutes long. We have a really excellent video producer who's helping to kind of stitch that together. And we've got a creative producer as well who's kind of from the back burner, just kind of helping to explore on the creative angle. So like I said, I don't have a deadline as far as when that's going to appear, but just keep an eye out. Gameologica again, and first episode will be on red mages, and if there's any kind of red mage in legendary or mythological history, and then a couple of the early things we'll explore is like the Master Sword right up here. There it is. The Master Sword and the Sword in the Stone. I think that there's obviously a lot of relationship there. One thing I really wanted to explore is the Dragon Quest slimes. Mekel, when was the last time you asked yourself, where do the slimes come from in RPGs? Like, is there a myth or a legend about like slime monsters? And so I went digging, and I'm not allowed to spoil it yet. We'll say that.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have been wondering about that because I noticed that, like, outside of Dragon Quest, like we have a lot of animes that are based around that. Like one that my wife absolutely loves is I was reincarnated as a slime.
Oh, so, that's like, the name of it? I'm not super familiar with anime right now.
Yeah, I think that's the name.
Oh, there's like a poster on the wall?
Well, she's got like the
stack of DVDs.
Yeah, so she's got like the manga and like some figurines and statues. So yes, it is How I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, I believe.
Yeah,
that's the name of it. So that one. There's another one. I think it's Campfire Cooking. There's another anime where you got a slime in it. Like there's a lot of them. Yeah, and it's just like I feel like as Dragon Quest has gotten more popular, at least in the West, which is crazy. It's taken as long as it has to get popular here. When you go to Japan, it's not Final Fantasy that's number one. It's been Dragon Quest since like the 80s. So.
Yeah. I feel so bad for Dragon Quest because, like, again, Super Nintendo, Super Famicom RPGs. I am constantly kicking myself, like, why are these Dragon Quest games not on the Super Nintendo? They look so great. Why did they not bring them over to the West? It's one of the great shames of video game history. But
like, I have
there you go.
My rural, they're blurred, but these are hard to come by if you've got a DS.
I'm sure getting harder to come by these days too, because that's how retro stuff works, right? So let's see. There's all that. We want to start rolling out interviews on the website. We've got a backlog of interviews that need publishing with artists, developers, composers. I want to launch. This is ridiculous. This is like somebody showed me this. So I was like, I want to do that because that's how I kind of operate. I want to start an RPG radio live stream that's just 24 hours of RPG music on YouTube. And so right now I've got this this Mac right here. It's so hard because it's mirrored. There it is. Now that Mac back there on that desk. See if I can set up like a 24-hour live stream and just play RPG music all day long on YouTube. So there's a lot going on. Say, I'm coming out with my own coloring book. No, just kidding. There's too much going on, but it's nice to stay busy, and I get to, because of the way that our lives are set up now in my family, I get to do this full time. So I'm trying to take as much advantage of the time as I possibly can to be able to be as creative as I possibly can. So that it's hopefully as lucrative as it possibly can be. But it's a good time to be alive. It really is. So the one thing is I just need to figure out how to live in Hawaii again. That's it. And then life will be perfect.
For those of y'all who don't know, we've actually been talking about that. Moses is definitely trying to get back out here to Hawaii. And I think it would be great, especially having another creator of your caliber out here. And I'm not trying to knock anyone else out here. I don't want anybody taking a sound bite and trying to turn it into like
other Hawaiian like creators are like, dang it, Mekel, he said it again.
I know, like certain groups out here, calm down, put your pitchforks down.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so but like what you've been able to accomplish, man, like your social media following, the website, your career, the podcast, everything. Like it's chef's kiss. It's so fucking good. And
thank you. That's very kind of you.
it's really and it's inspiring for me, seeing like, oh wow, he's able to do that, and it inspires me to want to do more because I've wanted to build a team for years and do stuff with people out here and expand it. And I think I've told you that before, like I've tried and they've not been successful attempts at all. It's been a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah, that sucks. It really does. I mean, Hawaii's not a big area,
No.
You need like one good creator like per island, and then you can kind of control the whole chain. There you go.
Yeah, because and for those who don't understand, it's more of a case of like we have a lot of people out here that are doing content. They're streaming or making YouTube videos, but the focus is so specific on just being for people here in Hawaii, or Hawaii, if you want to more correctly pronounce it. But it can be alienating if you're from somewhere else in the world and you're looking at it and you're like, I don't understand these references. Like, what are they speaking? Like, especially if they're speaking Pidgin. Like, I can speak fluent Pidgin. I can, and I know, like, we can turn it on and off. But it's like, if you're not used to that, someone's going to be like, oh, I can't keep up with it. So from a
English?
Right. Like from a marketing perspective, you're kind of like, you want to, and I know people have been upset with me saying, or people here specifically have not liked that I said this, but from a marketing perspective, you have to utilize Hawaii as a backdrop to your content because people look at Hawaii as paradise. So a lot of folks are not going to expect to find a content creator or journalist or a YouTuber, streamer, or whatever out here. So when they see it and you're like, oh, you're in Hawaii, but you can also appeal to a global audience, that's really what can set you apart. And that's something that is missed by a lot of folks out here, and a lot don't want to hear that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's, societal, social, political in many ways. But it's just something that I think would help more groups out here or individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Hawaii is such a unique place. It has a very unique culture, a very unique mix of cultures that's difficult to explain sometimes to folk on the mainland. And like, I think embracing that is a great idea, as part of like your brand. Like, folk need to know that you're in this unique position in this unique place that really is the crossroads between East and West. It really is the crossroads between Japan and America, the United States, the mainland United States. In a way that I think more people in our spheres could latch onto were they there and highlight and take advantage of and discuss. Like, I love watching travel vlogs and things like that. Not in like the cheesy ones, but like just a good like travel vlog where like, hey, I went and stayed at like a cat hotel. I'm like, I like cats, I'll watch your video. And like very few people are kind of doing that about Hawaii. Like you'll see like, here's the 10 best places to eat in Oahu. And I mean, look at me. Anytime there's a food video, I'm like, I'm gonna watch that. One of my favorite Hawaiian YouTubers is this guy named Sean Kelaponi. He always does these like 10 places to get noodles and stuff like that, and I enjoy that. But like, how many people are doing stuff that is really related to tech, like what you're saying, and related to gaming and stuff like that? Celebrities will come out there from the gaming industry. Presumably there's conventions and something that happens, especially in Oahu. Presumably there's things with anime and Japanese culture as well that is really rarely highlighted online. And so it's really cool to hear you talk about that and what the dynamics are there in that really unique place.
So, speaking of companies and groups that come out here, so Sega actually had a convention or a gathering for Sonic Frontiers about a year ago. And they flew people from all over the world to Big Island where they were having,
where was it? In Kona?
it was in Kona. Yeah.
Okay.
They flew, was it the YouTuber Some Come Meet Johnny, a lot of the gaming outlets, content creators and such, flew them all out here. And the whole thing, that was so funny. It was so funny. And I always I give the Sega PR person shit for this because no Hawaii or Hawaiian creator got invited.
Ooh, that's interesting. Now, did they know any? Like, presumably they know you.
They know me.
Okay.
They know at least two others. But so from what they said to me, it was, oops, we forgot. And I'm just like, that's kind of hard to really,
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, I'm trying to think of what's the best analogy for that. But it is weird. Like if you're going to a place that is so unique and you're trying to set this up, why would you not schedule the local talent, the local creators, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, because I was like, and I told Katie, who's PR for Sega, I told her, I said, what's funny is if you had invited any of the Hawaii creators, for us, it wouldn't even cost much to even go there. If we're on the Big Island, you can just go straight there. If you're on any other island, it's like $30-$40 just
to island hop. Yeah. That's what I was thinking too. It doesn't even make sense financially to fly people across the Pacific versus fly for a couple minutes on an airplane.
And another group that another company or organization that comes out here is Qualcomm. If you guys use smartphones or particularly Android phones, they put the chipsets in almost every, except for Google with their Pixel line, since they're using the Sensor series, their own custom chips. But Samsung and every other company utilizes Qualcomm chips, and they every single year, probably except for this year, I don't think they're going to do it this year with the fires and everything to happen, but every single year they actually have a convention in November on Maui, and they fly people, all the big tech YouTubers and tech outlets, they get flown to Maui, and no Hawaii content creators get invited. And it's just, that's something that I have been trying to understand with this industry, is when you do events in Hawaii, from a PR standpoint, it would look better if you actually have a local Hawaiian, or
and from a financial standpoint too, like we were just saying, it'd save you a lot on airfare.
Right. So it's very strange that they don't do that, or they have yet to do that. So that's something I think is an opportunity. I know a lot of industry people listen to this podcast, so hey, that's an opportunity for you.
There you go. Make it happen.
Fix that. Because especially in this day and age now, where representation is very, very big. If you go anywhere else, case in point, they go to California, do events, you're going to see California creators there. They go to Washington State, PAX, which I think just wrapped up earlier this week or last week. They have people from Washington going to that. They're in the UK, it's the same thing. They're in Australia. So if you're going to come to Hawaii, you need to have some of the local creators here, or you should at least invite some of them. And if you don't know, start looking them up.
Right. They shouldn't be too hard to find. They're trying to make themselves known.
Yeah.
So we need to change that. We need to figure out how to change that.
Yeah, we definitely do. So one thing I want to dive into real quick, and we were kind of talking about this, but being a parent and doing content creating and trying to stream and whatnot, because a lot of people think that oh, you should just stream for like hours upon hours every single day. And it's like, for us, we're just not in that position to do it. I can do it once a week on Sundays, but for you, what's your experience? Because I know we both were talking about this a little bit before we recorded, like dealing with people who don't have children, and that's a very interesting
It is, yeah.
scenario.
So like I mentioned too, we've got a team on the website, right? So people are in all kinds of different time zones. They have all different things going on in their lives. And usually I don't ask because it's not important as far as like, how the work is done. As long as it's done. Like if I assign a writer a press key, I just want to make sure that they write the review. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know how many children they have, or they live in an apartment or a house, or with their parents or anything like that. But it's I think there's so much that's kind of overlapping with this disconnect between folks who do have kids and folks who don't have kids. A lot of what I'll see sometimes is some creators will be like, hey, don't compete with people in their 30s, because they've got more time and disposable income and more energy and things like that, and I want to be like, don't feel like you have to compete with people who don't have kids if you have kids, because like you're just in different stages in life, and it's not like the conversation can very easily like head dive into having kids is better than not having kids, or vice versa, when that's not what the conversation is about. The conversation is about how do you personally manage your time if you don't have kids, or if you do have kids. If you do have kids, there's an added challenge of being able to manage your time and find time for certain things and be okay with interruptions. Like got to, especially if you got young kids. Like I'll be on a podcast and I hear my door, Daddy, can I play Mario? And I'm like, fine, just go play Mario. Like, ask your mother. Like, why are you knocking my door for this? Or then but at the same time too. So like, again, they knock on my door. Daddy, I just unlocked, some new thing in Animal Crossing. And you don't want to be like, leave me the heck alone, I'm trying to record a podcast. That sort of thing. you want to acknowledge that this is a human being.
Yeah.
Who, like, if you yell at them for that they're gonna remember that, right? They're not gonna remember the Mario thing that they unlocked or whatever on Animal Crossing. They're gonna remember that you yelled at them through a door because they were excited to tell you something, and something that happened to me recently. Actually, yeah, while we're on the subject of parenthood, I didn't even plan to bring this up, but it just recurred to me. Recently, my son, 8 years old, he beat Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, old school, right? Yep. And I was super happy for him because towards the start of the year, maybe tail end of last year, he had started playing it, and he was doing okay. And then he gets to, I don't know when was the last time you played this, but he got to the part where the dodo is like pecking the statues and you're Mario and you have to jump. You remember that? Yes.
Yeah.
It's so great. One of like my favorite things in that game. And he is like, darn, I can't get it. So he keeps trying over, and he reaches over to hit reset and bumps the cartridge, and it freezes, and he lost his data, and he was like 80% through the game. And so he had his tragedy and went through it emotionally, and I tried to help him through that. I was just like, if you want to play old school the old school way, this is what happens. This is reality. Like happened to me. When I was a kid, I'm up to Kefka in Final Fantasy VI, and I trip over the cord and pulls it out of the thing. Gone, the whole thing gone. And you just have to pick yourself up and start over again. So it was like you fall off the bike, you get right back on it type thing, but for gamers. And so I was so proud of him that he restarted the game. He got all the way back up to that part again. He aced that statue minigame the first try, and then went on to finish the game by playing through it essentially twice. So I was really happy about that. Obviously, like, Like, that's my boy. He finished Super Mario
Yeah.
RPG. Heck yeah. There's adults who haven't finished that game,
Yeah.
So I go online. I took, I rarely share pictures of my family or anything like that because I know how the internet can be. And the internet proved that the internet can be the way that it is. So I shared a picture of him really excited. Is the end credits, the thank you screen at the end of the game. And overwhelmingly positive response. Tons of people just like, hey, that's amazing. Like, thank you for passing on the knowledge of like games to the next generation. And then every once in a while, you got a few people who are like, stop virtue signaling like your kids, or one person like, why would you force your child to play a game they don't want to? Someday they'll resent you for it and stuff like that. And it was really strange to see those. I mean, again, they were the rare comments, but they were really ugly. And there were some that were vicious. And I think that's a fringe element, obviously. That's not to characterize any, like, just rational creators who don't have children do not talk like this. This was really, really vicious stuff. But at the same time, less fringe, what you tend to deal with too are people who are like, well, that's not a real game. That's not for real gamers. Animal Crossing New Horizons, that's a baby game, right? You'll hear it's not a real game, right? And it's like, what qualifies as a real game? And it's typically something that is oriented towards not the family, but the single player, right? The person who has all the time for the MMOs, all the time for, the grind on these really long hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hour games, which those folk are attempting to diminish the fact that families play these games, And so part of what I like to do personally, it's not part of my brand, but I like to kind of stand up for families. I like to kind of acknowledge casuals, like we've even got a phrase in this culture, don't we, where people say filthy casuals. They're so dirty and filthy, those casuals. I was like, casuals are the one keeping this industry afloat.
Thank you. I've been saying that for years,
bro.
Like, people
five,
don't
right
get
now.
that.
Yes.
People don't get
no,
that.
They don't.
Like,
who the heck? Like, people will be like, Final Fantasy 16 sold 3 million copies. I was like, that ain't paying Square's bills. Let me tell you that right now. No. You know what's paying Square's bills? Those mobile games that like millions and millions and millions and millions of people download. And Square's got, other bills that aren't being paid right now. I don't want to get into that, obviously. But all of like the casual stuff. And that doesn't mean like I'm like, oh, I love Candy Crush. Stick it in front of my face. Candy Crush all day. Farmville all day. I don't like playing all that stuff. But it's just to acknowledge that we have to share this space. We have to share this culture. Gaming culture has to be shared by more than just the hardcore gamer. The content creator who has no children, who's able to do these 9-hour streams every day and hit those games really hard. We have to get rid of terms like real gamer and real games and things like that, and acknowledge that family I'm sorry, but Super Mario Party or Mario Party Superstars is a real game. It just may not be the game that you like, and that's totally fine. If I was single and had no kids, I'm not going to sit at home playing Mario Party by myself. But when you've got a family, and a lot of people do, and when you've got kids, and a lot of people do, these are the kinds of games that they buy. And that's why they do so well. That's why Mario Kart does so well, So, yeah, that was a tall soapbox that I stood on there for. I wasn't planning all that, but yeah, it's part of I think the language needs to change,
No, I completely agree with you. Like I've run into that situation a lot where like other content creators I know, around our age, they don't have kids or they don't even have a significant other. So like to them, whenever, news drops, they're immediately on it, or they're able to devote all this time to covering a game or streaming it or, doing a review on it. And then like they'll hit me up and they're like, oh, how come, if you do a review, you're only showing early footage? I'm like, well, that's all I had time to record.
What do you
know?
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't like devote that much time to sitting and hitting record. And even also in that aspect, I try to respect, because you understand this, when you get a press copy of a code for a game, they don't want you to go outside certain realms of an embargo, certain things you can't show or you shouldn't show because it spoils something for the player. So, I make it a point to try and show, probably, like, if it's an RPG, something within the first 3 to 4 hours and nothing beyond that, especially with so many RPGs now being so long. Like Persona comes to mind, like, oh my god. And I could go on a rant about Persona because I don't care about the social aspect. I just want to
I remember you mentioned that. I've never actually played a Persona, so I can't agree or disagree, but they're long for what I understand.
They really are. My favorite Persona is Persona 2, or the Persona 2 duology, because they were dark and they really go into the psychological aspects that I like. It's similar to what Xenogears did. It's when it got to Persona 3 is when they shifted the tone to be more lighthearted, even though Persona 3 can be really dark. But 4 and 5, they're light, and when people think of Atlas now, they think of Persona. I'm like, I think of Atlas, I think of a lot more than just Persona. I'm a SMT fan, and there's not a lot of, well, there are a lot, but not to the extent of Persona. And that kind of goes into like where when one particular aspect of a franchise gets popular, then everyone hops in. Like, case in point, the Xeno series. People hopped in with Xenoblade 2. And yes, I can go on that rant too. Y'all like the big boobies. Y'all like the titties. I get it. I get it. Y'all got on it from there. And then, I'm such a big Xeno fan. No, you like Xenoblade 2. You like Xenoblade 3. When they remade Xenoblade 1, folks didn't like it. Oh, it's too basic. It doesn't do this. And it's just very simple.
And that's supposed to be the holy grail of the series, isn't it? Right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm like, go back and play Xenogears and Xenosaga. They won't do it. Oh, it's too old.
When somebody says, I can't go back that far, that graphics, I'm like, just get over yourself. What do you walk through a museum and be like, that statue is hideous, it was built 4,000 years ago? Like, this is kind of the only film a little bit. Right? Film a little bit. Like, I have met people who are like, I can't watch anything in black and white. I'm like, well, you're missing out, because there's some amazing movies in black and white, first and foremost. But games are so unique, and that people would be like, games from like 10 years ago, they'll be like, oh, that's unplayable. Like, it's only like 10 years old is barely any time. Like, on a human scale, that's like barely any time at all. But it's just crazy. Things go so fast in this industry. So
it really does. And like the news cycles for gaming and tech is literally, it used to be within 2 weeks. Now it's like the first day or two, and then maybe it'll go a week, and then people move on to the next thing. And it's just seeing how news cycles go, it's very, very disheartening. But going back to like dealing with the creators and such who don't have kids, like I had an instance where I was doing a podcast interviewing one of the creators that I met at the Final Fantasy 16 LA event, and I had my toddler with me. And my toddler, she's unique in the sense of, whenever I or her mother sits at a computer to work or do anything, it's like, what are you doing? Your attention needs to be on me. But it's like, when the attention's on her, it's like, oh, leave me alone. So she's interesting in that aspect. So when I was interviewing the guy, she kept doing so many things, so many times, because I used to do these podcasts live, and now I'm like, no, I'm just gonna pre-record them. So at one point, she took her diaper off, and then she went to an area where she was still within view, and she just peed and pooped. right there. And I'm just like, and then she puts it in her diaper, walks over to me, he's like, here you go.
Oh.
And I'm like, the guy's like, yeah, see, this is why I don't, this is why I hate kids. I don't want kids.
Sorry on that. Yeah.
And I'm just like, I say, you know what? That's not something you want to tell to someone who has kids, for one. And for two, you can just say, kids aren't my thing, and just leave it at that. And it's interesting in this field with the amount of creators I know, the amount that don't have kids, and like they're doing all this great stuff, and it's cool. I understand you don't have the limitations of when you can and cannot stream or make content, but at the same time, I guess from a cultural aspect, like for you and I being Hawaiians, it's like family is everything. Part of our kuleana is to continue expanding, to have our own families and kids and everything like that. And so it is very interesting. And I more so run into this with American creators than any other group, where it's like the me, focusing on myself. And I'm like, that's cool to a point when then you're going to get old and be like,
Yeah. No, I know what you're saying. There was a realization that I put into a tweet with it was a picture of my son beating the Mario RPG game, and I said, yeah, I love my friends online, but they're not gonna bury me. Like my kids are gonna bury me someday, and like, again, not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants the family life for themselves, and that's totally fine. Like, people can have that choice. I think understanding is what is what I would ask. I mean, like, you tell the story with your daughter, like, that's such a normal story. Like, it's a normal toddler story. Everybody's had the cleaning crap off the walls, like, literal story. And that doesn't happen every day, but it happens. And it happened in everybody's childhood as well. We just don't remember it. Like, I'm sure I did that to my mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the person who's like, I hate kids, they forget maybe that they were kids once. In a lot of ways, that's our purest form too. We learn a lot of techniques for playing the game as we mature into adults. We learn the facades and the masks and things like that. The kid don't like you, kid's gonna tell you they don't like you, or vice versa. So
it's a very interesting thing too. Like, I see, and this could probably be me going deeper into this topic of, like, beyond just the folks who don't like kids, but I've also noticed a lot of people are, especially in today's age, there's a lot of unhappy people, like, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but like, I've noticed a lot of people who outwardly are very successful, that creators I know that have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of followers, and they're doing great, they constantly have all this stuff going on, and they're some of the most miserable people. And it's just eye-opening. You would think, or most would assume, with a lot of success you would be happy, but external things don't really, they can amplify good or bad. They're not going to make you happy. You can have stuff like all this stuff, there's stuff behind me, stuff behind you, that's not going to make us happy. That's happiness comes from within. And it's just interesting seeing how many people are really miserable, and it's like the guy I was talking that I interviewed, like, I'm not gonna say his name, but like, he's quite miserable and constantly having issues of like self-worth and all this. And 1 minute he's making a post about bragging about his metrics and how well he's doing, and the next minute it's like how miserable he is. And it's like, it's kind of interesting. We're in this day and age where it's like people are that openly, and there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not trying to stigmatize it or anything, but like, it's very interesting seeing that, and it's I see it more so with people who just have themselves than people with either a partner or family. So it's a very interesting thing.
Yeah, numbers aren't friends.
Yeah.
Numbers make poor family members too.
Yeah.
We all love seeing statistics. I mean, I would lie if I told you that like when I get a spike on our website, it doesn't make me excited, you know? But that's so temporary, you know. It's not like I can ride off of that high for the whole week even. You know, it's kind of just like, hey, this is doing great, you know, and then that's about it. Like that's the extent of that excitement. Let me tell you a short story. So I moved from California to Texas about 2.5 years ago, and left a lot of friends in California. I had been there since 2002 when we moved from Hawaii, and left a lot of friends in Hawaii as well. Obviously, it's difficult to keep in touch when you know you've got several hours of time zones to figure out. California, same thing, same sort of thing. I keep in touch with a couple people, but my wife and I, we try to have parties all the time. We try to have people over all the time. We loved having people over all the time. I love hosting. I love welcoming people into my home. I love feeding them. Like that's the Hawaiian part, right?
Yeah.
Like I remember growing up as a kid, like if you go to a Hawaiian person's house, you're going to eat. Doesn't matter if it's 12 o'clock, if it's 3 o'clock, if it's 1 o'clock, if it's 7 in the morning, you're going to eat something. They have something cooking. I remember going to one of my mom's friend's house, and we had just come from like eating somewhere. She's like, please eat, please, like begging, you know, there's all this food on the stove. So you sit there and you eat, you got to eat something. You have to at least try it, you know? And so when people come to my house, I'm like, please let me feed you. Let me make you some food. Like it's part of the Hawaiian hospitality, and it's a joy to be able to do that. The story though, is that when we left all our friends in California, what happens to all that? You know, who can you invite over? So I make friends with my neighbors, had them over a couple times. That's been really fun. They're not going to listen to this. So I can actually like, they're not exactly my age, I could say. So like, you know, one of them is much older than me. So it can be difficult to have conversation, but they're really wonderful people in their own way, you know, and I love having them over, but it's not the same as like scheduling a game night with the boys, you know, or like my wife having her girlfriends over and stuff like that. And us doing barbecues all the time. So I miss that. You know, when you point like all this stuff back here out, it's fun. But it's funner with people around, you know, like, like I love couch co-op. I love local co-op. I love having people to hang out with and wrestle. One of my favorite pictures that I've got is on the Nintendo Wii. There was some schlocky like trivia game that we were playing, and my friend and I, because there's the Wiimotes, right? So you're like trying to aim carefully, and he starts like, you know, nudging my shoulder, and like I can't get it to do right, and the time's counting down, and pretty soon we're wrestling. He's on my back, and we're on the couch. He's on my back, and I throw him back like this, and he goes, "Whoa!" And I was like, "What happened?" So he carefully unplugs, and his butt had gone through my apartment wall. So I have a picture somewhere of a dollar bill next to his butt imprint in the apartment wall for scale. But you cannot recreate that experience on Twitch, on a podcast, on a website, on a YouTube channel, in your game room, no matter how big it is or how many games you have, without other people. You know, and like that is such an important part of life. And it really struck me, this move, again, the pandemic, where you couldn't be around a lot of people. It really struck me as like how important people are to maintaining your sanity. Sometimes, you know, maintaining your sanity, you need people to go away for a little bit. I understand that. But like your happiness, your joy, it's just interactions, friendships, things like that. You need that in your life. You really do.
So, oh man, it's so crazy to think that the pandemic started like roughly 3 years ago, and just how God, like it's that was something we never would have expected in our lifetime. Like that's something like you would expect to hear from like maybe 100 years ago or so.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
something like that, and being able to say what life was like before the pandemic and life was like post pandemic, and it's interesting. There are days I sit and think about that, and I'm like, wow. For a point, I never thought we were going to come out of the quarantine time.
Yeah.
It was very much like wear a mask, you can't go here. Like I know here in Hawaii we had they instituted curfews, and so that was something that I was like, okay, I've never had to deal with that to the magnitude that it was. I've never seen Waikiki just dead.
Oh, a ghost town? Yeah, that would be really surreal. I never thought of that. Because that place is always packed.
Yeah.
Do you remember when it started and you were like wiping down your groceries? Do you remember that? We didn't have to do that for 2 years. I remember, and then they're like, "It's airborne, you guys! It's airborne." And we're like, "Oh, whew!" Because if I had to wipe down one more gallon of milk, I'm throwing up all over.
But like just going through that and just seeing how like that affected a lot of people, you know, on a personal and mental level, looking at how that affected the game industry. And okay, so it's kind of unrelated, but it is related. I have been a big proponent of saying that the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S should not have launched either until last year or this year, because and this is why I'm gonna say this. Put pitchforks down, people. This is why I'm saying this.
We're like, PS5 is my favorite console of all time. How dare you?
Oh gosh, the Sony ponies and then the Xbox. Look, the reason I'm saying this is because we're only now getting games that are dedicated to these consoles specifically. 3.5 years into this new console generation, we're only getting that now.
Well, you know, I am 100% there with you, but you know, exclusives are a dirty word these days.
They are.
You notice when this generation rolled out. Yeah, and I lump Switch into this generation because it's old at this point. But leaving that aside, you know, the Xbox, the Sony, when those were rolling out, then we started to get this really heavy dialogue and monologue even from big people in the industry of like, you know, we shouldn't have all these multiple platforms. We shouldn't have exclusives. It's unfair that they bought this studio and I'm going to buy this studio. That's not right. We should just, why are we gating things behind, you know, people having to pay money? And I'm like, are you giving away your box for free? Because like there's a cost to entry. This is a luxury product, right? Like this is not food or water or housing. This is this is something you buy if you've got the extra money for it. Phil Spencer, who seems like a nice guy, he seems like the kind of guy who would come over and help you move on a weekend, you know, was talking about how bad exclusives are. Recently, Yoshi P was like, I wish we just had one platform. I was like, your game might have sold better, maybe, but that would be worse. It would be worse for consumers. You know, how could more options be bad for consumers? You know, like we get to make the decision based on sometimes as much as just preference. We get to make that decision. But my perspective is that dedicated, I like to use that, not exclusive, because exclusive can be exclusionary, let's say, but dedicated games for a console are designed with that console's infrastructure in mind. They're designed specifically for that infrastructure. I believe it was Kojima who said that specifically about Death Stranding when that came out. Exclusives sell systems, you know, like I was seriously considering picking up a PlayStation 5 just for Final Fantasy 16 because I love Final Fantasy, you know, like I wasn't thinking that before when I got a PC, you know, I've got a PC and a Switch. I can play everything. Like literally like almost everything that there is, you know, maybe not Astro's Playroom or something like that, You know, maybe not the Demon Souls remake, something like that, but like most things you can play with just those 2 items. And I want to get a PlayStation. I've supported PlayStation generations, every single generation. But it's a hard ask for me personally because I don't need a mid-generation upgrade. You know, a lot of people will be like, well, the controller's worth it. I'm like, the controller? Oh, or we're gonna just like play, like move the joysticks around for like 100 hours. Like that doesn't sound fun to me at all. Like, you know, and a graphical upgrade, that's great if those are the things that you want. I'm just saying, for me, I need to see those dedicated games. You know.
I mean, and when you really look at it, there's not a lot of PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series exclusives right now. There just isn't. Like when I think about it, okay, what do we have exclusive on PlayStation 5?
I think there's like 5 or 6. We counted it once.
Right? So you got Demon Souls remake. You could have said was it Returnal before that went to be. So many PlayStation games are going to PC.
Right. Horizon Forbidden West went, didn't it? Oh, that might have been multi-plat too.
That was PS4 and 5.
Yeah.
So it's like it's there's not, you know, and I've gotten a lot of hate for saying this, but I'm like, honestly, the only benefit I've gotten out of getting a PS5 or Series X has been little to no load time compared to like my PlayStation 4, or my Xbox One. So it's not. We're starting to see a lot of diminishing returns when it comes to these major consoles now, in comparison to when we went from the Atari 2600 to the NES.
Oh, the
Sega Master System.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like it's not, we haven't had that big of a leap anymore.
Yeah.
And even some games coming out now look like they could have come out on the PS2 or the original Xbox. Like we're not, it's weird seeing this slump that gaming is in, and people now are saying like, oh, wait till we get the PlayStation 5 Pro. Why do we need that?
I was just gonna bring that up. Like I encountered that person for the first time. It was like, see, if we get a PlayStation 5 Pro, then that'll solve everything. Then life would be better. And I was like, what? Isn't a PS5 a PS4 Pro? Now you want a PS4 Pro. It doesn't make sense to me. And I get, again, like you said, you got a lot of hate for that. Here's where we are as a culture, as a gaming scene, where you get hate for a preference. That's weird to me. Like, just fundamentally weird to me. It is totally cool if somebody wants if somebody wants a PS5 just for the graphical updates because they care about that, that's fine. I can't understand that. I can say I want to see some exclusives, but again, options, right? Folk can buy it if they want to, and folk can buy it if they, not buy it if they don't want it. So, yeah, it's a weird stage to be in, though.
Yeah, and it's like, if there's a console that I'm actually excited for, it would be Switch 2. I'm excited for that. And same group of people like, oh, Switch has no games. That's an interesting. Okay,
well, that goes back to the earlier, right? They're not real games.
Yes.
You'll hear that about Zelda and Kirby, and they're not real games. It has no games.
That is the weirdest thing. Okay, so when I hear people like, I saw that, I think his name Ryan McCaffrey or whatever on I think he's with IGN. So he made a comment and he got blasted by the bulk of the gaming industry for this. He said for the PSVR 2, there's no games for it. There are no games in development, or along the lines of there's no games for it, no games in development, no compelling VR experiences. And it's like, I was like, what are you talking about? Are you saying there are no games you want to play on it? Because there's a metric ton of PSVR 2 games coming. Games that were not capable of running on the VR1, not capable of running on the HTC, whatever the Oculus Quest 1 and 2, that were exclusive to the higher end PC VR that's being ported to PlayStation 2 VR, and other games being specifically made for that with the architecture in mind. Like, what are you talking about? And like, seeing people run with what he said versus the developers are like, what are you talking about? We just announced this game. This is coming out. This is coming out. This is coming out. Like, and then you had that led to people saying like, oh, it was overpriced. It's this, it's that. And okay, I can understand people being put off by the cost of consoles and stuff now. I look at PSVR 2, and it's kind of interesting because I said this, and then one of the PSVR 2 developers for was it Firewall Ultra, it just recently came out. He said the same thing. It's a different platform. Like, yes, it works in conjunction with, it does need the PS5, but VR games don't play like a normal game that you would pick up a controller with. Like, that's in a completely different platform. And for the tech that's in the VR2, for it being a single USB-C cable that just plugs directly into your PS5 on the front, and you get the two controllers and you put on the headset, it is the most simple and, I would say, the most immersive VR experience I've ever had. I had an HTC Vive. I've had these other VR headsets where you had to mount the cameras in certain areas of your room. You had to have certain lighting, and all that tech is now built into one headset. You just put it on and that's it. So it's like, when I was refuting that, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, I had people say to me like, oh, well, you're just saying that because you're a Sony partner, you're a Sony pony. I'm like, no, I understand tech. I follow tech, and we've come a long way in the VR space. Like, I remember when it was super expensive and it was niche, like $500 for a thing. I get it. That's asking a lot, but people need to understand this is a hobby where you have to have money to play. And it's like that falls on deaf ears with a lot of people. Like, oh, like what is it, the ROG Ally, the $699 is too expensive, or the upcoming what is it, Lenovo Legion Go, oh, it's too expensive. Then budget, then get rid of something you have. Like, it's just the conversation of what is and isn't too expensive. Like, do I think games should be at a staple of $69 now? No, but I also remember when games didn't have a price regulation in the 90s or the 80s.
Donkey Kong like $90.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I remember when there was no staple for what the price was, which it didn't get a staple until, I want to say, the PS2 era, where we went from from $39 to $49, and then the last generation, or what's it, the PlayStation 360 generation, we went from $49 to $59. And now we're at $59 to $69. But at least it's still within 8, unless you're Ubisoft and you got your regular edition, you got your deluxe edition, you got your ultimate edition, like, aside from that. But like, it's interesting how the conversation goes, and the most vocal are the people who have the least experience in being a gamer, in the sense of not trying to say like a real gamer, but understanding the history of where it's been, where it is now, and where it's going.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think I always tend to lean on the buyer sets the price, right? So like the seller can be like, this is how much I'm going to sell it to you, but the buyer is the one that decides if they buy it or not, right? And eventually these things go down in price. We've seen that with a lot of hardware, whether you want to call that like hardware, peripheral hardware or not. Certainly seen it with consoles. Like consoles eventually go down in price,
Mhm.
or they become kind of holy grail items and they just keep going up in price. You know, you got to watch out for that. But I mean, I would probably say to the person who thinks it's too expensive, don't buy it. Wait
Yeah.
until it goes down in price, or save up for it. So like I'll be honest with you. I've never actually used VR. I'm over here playing a freaking Super Nintendo, dude. Like I'm not I don't know too much about VR. I know, you know, I've seen a couple of things that were like they had different sales expectations for VR and things like that. I've seen things like that. The one that really got me was the Apple Vision Pro. I had to
Oh
look at it.
God.
It was like $3,500. I was like, who's this for? Like somebody is for somebody, but I know that's that buyer, and I'm me. I'm the buyer here that has to make the decisions on like what I buy or not. So you know, it's the same thing with the new systems from Xbox and PS5. I'd love to have those, but for the price and what they're offering and what my preferences are, for how I game and how what I would like to play, it's hard for me to find the money for that when I'd rather get something else. With VR, again, I've never tried it. So I think like if you're looking at somebody who likes VR, here's a price. They're probably going to be willing to play it. If it's somebody who doesn't like VR, here's a price. They're probably not going to be willing to play it. If there's somebody who has no idea what VR is like, then and they see a price, then they may be on the fence with that. Like the last time I think I tried VR was like, you know, remember in the 90s you'd go around the mall and they would have like those little car cabinets, and you get inside and there'd be like a projector in there and they'd like turn you around and stuff like that for like $5. It's probably the last time I did anything like that. So, but the point is though that there's an audience, right, for it.
Yeah.
And that audience is willing to pay the current entry fee for those things, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Beyond that, I don't have a ton of VR experience, so I gotta admit.
No, it just really, you know, and going back to like, I've tried VR from when, you know, we first had the first couple PC headsets that were just super expensive, and experience was hit or miss. And it's like being able to have one that can connect to your PlayStation at this point where everything is in the headset. It, you know, you put it on, you're looking at like VR games in the past, because of how they develop it, like whatever you're looking at, that's going to be high resolution. Everything else is going to be, you know, like lower resolution. Being able to have it now where you have literally 2 4K screens and everything looks crisp, and like there's certain games that are super immersive, like the Horizon game in VR, Call of the Mountain. Like when you turn off that snap turning, which is mainly there for people who have motion sickness, when you turn that off and you can actually control it like you would a first person game with the analog sticks, and you can move around and interact with stuff, that is it, like literally pick up any random thing. That is super immersive. Like it's to the point where, like, you know, my wife actually has to watch her kid, because like we'll alternate. I'll play it and then she'll play it. Especially she loves Beat Saber and what's it, there's like a Guitar Hero game and a drum game and a bunch of other stuff. Like there's some really immersive stuff that, like, if we played this back in 2016 2017, it would not run as well as it is now. And you know, it's just one of the things, like I try to say, like when I do reviews of stuff, I try to tell people, like, look, if you can experience it, if you can go to a store and try it out, try it out. I'm never going to tell someone definitely buy this or don't buy that, because what I have a preference for may not be what you have a preference for.
Right.
And it's like the problem we're having now, and it's at a societal level, is you can't have preference without having controversy for having a preference for something. And it's just ridiculous. Like, especially going back to the whole Nintendo is not a real, you know, they're not really making games, or Zelda's not really da da da. And it's like, going into like the whole console war thing. Oh my god! Like, you guys
we
don't.
touched on this just a little bit on the previous one. I love it. Yeah,
we did. Like, people don't understand. You're not having a console war now. You're having a platform preference war, because now when you play a game, now it's what controller do you want to pick up and play it on? What platform? What features? Do you want achievements on Xbox? Do you want trophies on PlayStation? Do you want none of that existing on Nintendo's Switch? Do you want to play on PC? It's literally that. Multi-platform games did not exist back then the way they are now, because back then you could have it right. Like, you could have a game on the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and the TurboGrafx 16 and the Amiga and Amstrad and all that, and it would be a completely different experience based on the platform. It's not like it is now, and it's just so weird seeing that conversation. And it's to a point where a lot of times I don't even engage in these gaming conversation with people, because I'm like, when did you start gaming? Oh, I started gaming in 360 era. Okay.
Like, I'm old enough to be your father. You know what, too? And like, gaming, console wars aren't fun anymore.
Mm-mm.
Like, I love having fun with that kind of thing. I don't like purposefully try to like, attack somebody's character or anything like that. That's, for me, that's the line in the sand. Unless they're gonna come after me, I'll come after them, because like, I'm not just gonna like let somebody roll all over me. But like, console war jokes, I think, are some of the funniest memes I've ever seen. Like, especially the old ones. I've turned out a few of my own. I love seeing them online. If you have like a Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo meme, tag me. I want to see it. Like, I always crack up. It was such a special time to be alive. They're duking it out in commercials. I remember arguing about it in schoolyards, and it was good fun. Like, it was with friends, It's not like now where you have the anonymity of the internet, and so people could say anything, right? And they'll be like, you like PlayStation because you're fat. And be like, like, that doesn't, where's the joy in that argument? There's none, and so like, to go back again and then just enjoy the way that like the console wars used to be, is a fun thing for me. I get a kick out of that. I think today, like, again, if we're going to talk about exclusives, that's rare between, Xbox and PC are like practically the same thing now.
Yeah.
And then Xbox and PlayStation, there's a lot that's shared between them. They're kind of struggling to, fight over crumbs in a lot of ways, it seems like. But like, they're trying to secure for themselves their things. But there's a lot that's multi-platform. A lot of the really big stuff is multi-platform. Switch will have a lot of first-party, exclusives. And I typically say that's what you buy Nintendo for. Because you're not going to get Mario on Xbox. You're not going to get Zelda on PlayStation. You might find like the indies that are kind of like, this is a Mario-like. This is a Zelda-like, But yeah, you get those things. You enjoy them with your kids. Like, I'm not gonna play Elden Ring with my kids, like I'll play these other ones with my kids. So I think that it is like you said, it's just a really different dynamic about that. And people are nasty. They're nastier about arguing about their favorite plastic box these days. There was a guy who called me xenophobic over a console war fight.
Are you serious?
It's really funny. He started in on this is real brief. He started in on, well, you only think that because your education system is trash in America. And I was like, that was weird, like insulting the country that I come from in like a video game conversation. So again, not to be one to just like, just roll all over me. I insulted him back. I was like, well, maybe you're just mad because you didn't get, I don't even want to say it. It was a zinger. Let's just say that was a zinger. But yeah, that was a fun conversation. But stuff like that, like, it's fun to jibe back and forth over things like that. For me, at least, it's part of my personality. But when people get really like personal about it, that's where it's not fun anymore, you know. And these are games. I mean, seriously, like we can't have fun with games. What is left in life? It's like, you know, just go to the beach, go outside, touch the lawn, all that sort of thing. And yeah, that's my perspective, at least, on it.
Like there's a game that came out, I want to say like 2 years ago, called Elix 2. And I made a comment. I made a short, and it was also within like the review of the game too, because I know the devs, and I'm friends with a lot of them, and the game is, it's by a smaller studio. It doesn't look that great. Like, it's not going to look next generation. It looks like something from probably the early to mid 360 era, and but it's got jank, but it's got some real good qualities to it. And I praise the game for the good qualities, but I'm still gonna make fun of the crappy parts of it, because I understand, like, and I told the devs I was gonna joke on it, and I told them the joke, and then they laughed at it. They're like, oh, go ahead. So basically what I said was, hey, you know, Elix 2 2008 call, they said they want their graphics back. so like they loved it. They're like, yeah, go ahead and do it. And so it's so funny. I put that out 2 years ago. That is the #1 video on my YouTube channel that consistently gets comments.
Oh, for that joke?
For that joke, that are incredibly vitriolic. Like, I'm shocked that people can, and it, for a point, I would always respond and be like, hey, it's a joke between me and the devs. Like, don't take
You're not allowed to, no, you're not allowed to joke.
No.
Like,
you look like a
yeah, right. And then then they start comparing you to like zoo animals and stuff like that, right? Like, I'll get that. It's so weird, bro. I've gotten death threats over like conversations off of Twitter. There was a guy who found my phone number, my personal cell phone number online, and called me after midnight. I'm in bed. And I was like, well, who the heck is this? Hello? Still mad and upset and emotionally distraught over an argument about video games. Like, we're in this really weird stage. And like, I think the more people that talk through that, and like the more people that point out like, hey, this is kind of unhinged, is good, because we don't need to be going there. I don't need to be finding somebody's phone number online, you know, and getting that emotionally invested in a disagreement over a video game that maybe I liked and he didn't, or maybe I didn't like and he did. That to me just doesn't make sense at all. But the death of comedy. And how many career comedians have you seen who are like ancient? They're like in their 80s, 90s, 70s, you know, like they're old, and they're like, the death of comedy is coming.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of like, I will make jokes because I love to make jokes. I love to laugh. And my dad made jokes. I inherited it. I'm sorry. I will try and not make jokes that like are about a specific person, because like, again, that's a line. Like your joke, you know, for the game, right? Elix, was it? Yeah.
Elix 2, yeah.
Yeah. You didn't call the devs idiots. No, because that would be crossing a line. You're not saying you guys are stupid and terrible and inept and unskilled for making a game like this. That's crossing a line. Instead, you made a joke about the graphics, but about what's so wrong about that, you know? But people will take those things very personally. So it's something to watch out for in the way that we carry ourselves online. 2, it's something to expect. And 3, it's something I think to normalize. Like, normalize that people make jokes. It's fine. It really is fine.
Yeah. So I know you said you wanted to pick my brain, so I'm gonna put you are in the hot seat. Go ahead.
How?
Yours.
How? That's it. How? No. Like, I guess Let's see. Did I have any like follow-up questions, I guess, after our last conversation was like really general. Obviously, I don't want to ask you a lot of like personal things while we're like recording here. Where do you live? You know, stuff like that. No, I'm just kidding. But like yeah, like how do you stand out from the morass, the masses, the mob? There's so many people doing this sort of thing, you know, that we're doing. There's a ton of people who start podcasts. There's a ton of people who start blogs. When I started blogging, it was real weird. A lot of people started blogging at the same time and doing game stuff. So we had like this little blogging community. It was great. There was some competition back and forth, but everybody was kind of doing their own thing. It was really wonderful. We kind of all did collabs now and then and things like that. But it was also humbling in that, like, hey, I'm not the only person doing this. Like, there's a lot of people, you know, doing this. Now, as I'm trying to look into getting into YouTube, that's a very saturated platform. Like, there's a lot of people on there doing really incredible things. I don't have any, I don't have like any like concept of like, I'm going to put out a video and get 1 million hits and just be super famous. And like, you know, like you've got to do things to stand out. So like for you, you know, you've got a lot going on. You've got a lot of really cool things. You're running like 4 or 5 podcasts?
4 going into 5 podcasts.
4 going into 5. Now that you got the YouTube channel, you've got sponsorships, you got affiliates, like you've got those relationships with people in the industry, you know, people, you know. How do you stand out as a brand in 2023 from all the masses? Very general question, I think.
That's a very loaded question. That's
a
big question.
Well, you remember all the questions I asked you last. Loaded questions.
It's really, I'm not gonna lie, it's really hard trying to stand out now. Especially post pandemic, because the pandemic saw a flood of people hop into this space. I would say, at least for me, having Hawaii as a background is one, and also trying to market to a global audience is the second part of that. But outside of that, I can't even say my approach is original, because my approach is very much, when it comes to game coverage and tech coverage, is very much from the magazines that I grew up reading. So that was the biggest influence on me: GamePro magazine, EGM, PC Gamer, all that stuff. When I was a kid, very much influenced me, because this is something I always want to do. But seeing now, you've got all the, you know, you got the angry reviewers, which that was big, very big in the 2010s.
I'm glad it's on the wane. I think it's going down. Like people were like, this was funny, but I think we all kind of realized not everybody can do that well, you know. And so when you see it, like I saw a person recently, somebody forwarded it to me. They're like, hey, this person's doing a hate play. Have you ever seen that before? A hate play?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Like a playthrough where you just like constantly are full of hatred? Like, why would anybody want to watch that? But I don't know. Maybe that's just me being old. Like, I don't get that. But yeah, I agree.
See, we're at the age where it's like, if we don't like something, we just don't deal with it. You know,
right? Like, I don't have the time. Like, I'll tell you flat out, no, I don't want to watch that. Like, people will send me stuff all the time, and I'll be like, I've checked that out once and I'm good. I don't want to waste any more of my precious time left on this one thing.
So, I guess going back to the question, like standing out, like if you're going to do YouTube, the key word is YouTube. It's about you, right? So you got to put the you in it. And in putting you or yourself in the content you make, you know, outside of just YouTube, it could be anything, podcasting and all that. You have to put an aspect or a percentage of yourself, not 100% of yourself, because that can also go south.
Oh
Trust me.
yeah, I know
Trust
what you
me.
mean.
Trust me. I used to do a thing where, okay, so how we Hawaiians can be. We can talk shit, the best of folks, and Samoans can be even worse. We can talk a lot of shit too. So I used to do a thing called a campfire, where I would take a topic, or if I had a troll, I'd just roast the fuck out of them. And I used to do that for fun, and never took it seriously until I started seeing people took that personally.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, let me dial that back. So I still kind of do that, but like more in a fun or self-deprecating way, just so it's like not seen as
Yeah.
malicious.
When you add
But
self-deprecation, that kind of balances it out. Yeah.
right. So like I really feel like standing out is just like put an aspect of yourself in it. Um Try not to, like, it's okay to be inspired by someone or something, but not being a carbon knockoff of someone else, because you'll never be them.
Yeah.
Um and just like experiment, try different things to see what feels right for you, because maybe you don't want to do reviews, maybe you want to do a podcast and just talk about it, maybe you want to do a live stream and just play the game and let people experience it through that way, or that's how I feel like you stand out. And the biggest thing is longevity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started, I 2015, really 2016, but 2015. When I started to now, there's probably maybe a handful of people that are still around. You will start to see, as you're doing podcasting, journalism, blogs, YouTube, streaming, whatever, people come and go. It's a revolving door. And I've seen a lot of people start, and they start strong, or they start weak and then eventually get strong, and then eventually just drop it. So the biggest way to stand out really is how long can you last?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
yeah.
I so agree with all those things that you just said. I think like on the line of like put you in it, it's like you can't emulate somebody else. You could take things that you like, like in writing, you'll often hear the advice, writers don't write, they steal, and it's like there's an element of that that's true. Like you're inspired constantly by the things that you consume that are art. But you can't just take somebody else's persona, whether you're a writer or a YouTuber or whatever, and do that. Like you cannot set somebody up on a pedestal and be like, I'm just going to become this person, because you don't have their life experiences, you don't have their personality, you don't have a variety of other things. But that's not to say you're missing stuff. You have what you have, and you got to put that into your content. So I really agree with you there. The longevity thing is huge.
Yes.
And that's why burnout is so dangerous. I will never forget. Again, when I started blogging, there was a lot of blogs and we'd all keep in touch, and I would see new blogs come and go, sometimes within just a span of weeks. One blog pops up, their tagline, your number one stop for all gaming news and video games. And their about page, or their description at least, was like, I'll be reviewing every game. Not every game that comes out, not every game on X system, right? Every game for 50 years of an extant industry, commercial industry. No. I just can't. I met it. Yeah. I don't want to start naming all these examples, but yeah, it's impossible. Find a context, find a niche, maybe there aren't any niches left, combine niches, get creative with that. God bless him. I met this guy recently, is still in my Discord. I worry about him, treat him like a son. No, just kidding. Like, but you talk to people and he'll be like, you know, how many Steam games do you think I have to buy to be a YouTuber? And I'm like, 0. I have 12 Steam games. I'm about to make YouTube videos. You don't need, like, people will look at like a Metal Jesus Rocks video, or, you know, any of those videos where they're standing in front of like a huge wall that looks like a retail store of games. And they'll just be like, I want to be like that. So that means I have to collect games in order to be that. And you don't. If you're listening right now and you think that, stop thinking that. Like, you do not have to drop tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even for some of these big collections, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, in order to just emulate what somebody else is doing, and then get on and you find that you hate producing videos, or that like you don't want to write scripts, or that like
talk to him.
You don't like doing reviews, bro. I think about this stuff like daily, and there are so many people that is part of the allure of like the YouTuber, right? The celebrity YouTuber, right? We all want to be like celebrities. You know, there's somebody that we want to be like, and that's okay. Where it becomes extreme is where you start, you know, like doing, where there's like science fiction movies where like people are like that one movie where people were infecting themselves with diseases from celebrities because they wanted to be like, no, no, you don't have to do that. You don't have to take emulation that far. Take inspiration, not emulation. There's your sound clip right there.
The other thing too, outside of burnout, there's the imposter syndrome, which can very strongly hit. And here's the thing, like everything, you have to keep everything in a perspective. You know, you have to understand that certain things may work for you that may not work for someone else, and vice versa. And understanding that it's okay that this may not work for you. You either may need to do something or not, and just understanding and be okay with that, and not comparing yourself, which is hard to do because nature people is we're always going to compare on some level. I've seen that level of comparison really get ugly, and I mean, I've dealt with it myself. Like, I've had instances before where I'm like, well, how come that person got this? And, you know, da, da, da. And I've been there. I've done that. I've seen it. I've seen it at its ugliest. I've been on the receiving end of that. And it's very interesting seeing how that can come out in someone's content when they get tunnel vision on that. And it's like, okay, you need to stop and redirect or pivot. And a lot of people can't do that. And, you know, the biggest advice I can give people when it comes to dealing with burnout or imposter syndrome is take some time off, which is in many ways career suicide in this field. I get it. Especially when you do this as a career, like you kind of have to maintain an online presence. But when it gets to the point where it's detrimental for yourself, your mental state of being, your emotional well-being, you need to step back. I've had to do that multiple times this year. And even right now, like I'm fighting through burnout because this has been a stacked year for gaming. Like every month has had like multiple big releases, and I'm very selective of what I do and don't cover, and I try not to cover everything. But it's really at a point where like the stuff that I do want to cover, like I get it and I work on it and I do the best I can, and it gets compared to what other people are doing, bigger creators. And you know, sometimes I'll get content out at the embargo, and by getting it by the embargo, because people, here's another thing y'all need to understand too. People have their preferences of who they want to get their content from. Like there's some people that prefer going to McDonald's over Burger King or
Right.
over In and Out or whatever, but they'll like McDonald's drops it, or Starbucks, really one of the most interesting coffee places out there. But people go there over going to like a Coffee Bean or whatever. So you can put out something. Case in point, Sea of Stars. Like I hit the embargo, but there are bigger creators that covered that. I didn't get that traction that they've got. So, and that kind of got to me at a point. But I also had to understand, hey, I'm not them. I'm not as known as them. But eventually somebody is going to catch wind of my review, written or video. And on top of that, there are people, like in an instance of like companies that they picked me to have a review copy. That says a lot, and it's like I had to take steps back to reassess that, and it's a lot of people don't understand when it comes to the creator, being a creator or being any type of artist or entrepreneur. It is more mental than anything else that you physically do, because you're constantly battling yourself, constantly battling your self-doubt. And it's just, you can't let it consume you. Give it some time, let it run its course, and then be like, all right, time to get back to work.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long-winded. But
No, that's wonderful, because I think it gets down to what is the nucleus of all this: self-worth.
Yeah.
Everything that we talked about today, almost everything, stems from how an individual interacts with their own perceived self-worth, with their own perceived self. Like, how do they interact with others online? How do they handle jokes from total strangers on the internet? How do they handle slights against their favorite commercial product of choice? Now here talking about how do they handle dealing with numbers. Earlier we were talking about people being happy, or not. Sometimes that really does come down to self-worth, and like those great numbers can be there sometimes. You can hit a video and it makes it big, or in my sphere, you put out an article and Google's like, hey, I like that. And you're like, sweet, I'm glad you like it, Google, carry on. And that feels good. But like, those things don't actually define your self-worth. They're not really your value. They're part of it, sure. Like those are extensions of yourself, because you've spent your time and your energy, your creative power and your thought to make those creations. And so like, I get it. It's like if you're the sun, then this is your effulgence. This is your ray. These are your rays of light, and so when people judge that, or they're not as well received, that can hurt the sun itself. But the sun's still burning, like you're still you. It doesn't actually change that. And that's what I think more people have got to start to arrive at, that like, if your video does badly or poorly, or it falls below expectations, if you write something and like it gets far below, far fewer hits than you expected, if you're excited to launch this new product and like you don't get the response from your community or the online community that you wanted, that's okay. Because it like, you still are the person that you are. It doesn't mean that like the first thing, like saying it is kind of funny, but it's so true. Like the first thing you'll jump to is like, well, I guess nobody likes me, right? Like, and it's like, no, you sit and think about it. There are people who come and interact with you, whether it's interacting with your content or just you or whatever it is that you're doing, And even just to take that one step again beyond the internet, this microcosm of life. It's so easy to put so much emphasis on the internet and on success on the internet. But taking that step back again, like, you have a family. I have a family. Like, there's people who love me in real life who don't interact with me online at all. And that's part of who I am, those networks, those relationships, you know? So I think that really ties. I'm still in my like podcast hosting mode. Sorry. So like, I think
no.
It really ties everything on this whole episode together. Yeah, it comes down to self-worth. You know, what do you think? You know, like, I asked somebody once. I was on this show. It was A Gamer Looks at 40. Excellent show by Bill, great friend of mine, and we were talking about Link from The Legend of Zelda, right? And he was like, "Do you think Link matters, like as a character, you know, in these stories, or to the player? Does Link matter?" And I was like, "Let me ask you, do you matter, Bill?" And he was like, you know, he wasn't ready for that question. I was like, he's like, "I think so." I was like, "Well, I think you do." He's like, "Well, thank you." And I was like, you know, you've got family, you've got friends, like, there are people who love you, you matter, you know? And by extension, then Link matters because Link is the player character, you know, he's the avatar. He doesn't really have his own personality. You know, you kind of fill that role. He matters because you matter. But if you forget that, just think of Link. And like, if Link matters, you matter, because Link matters because you matter. You matter, you know, and that I think is pretty encouraging for people who maybe are, like some of the folk we mentioned earlier, really successful, you know, hitting those numbers. But it just shows you that even with high numbers, they can have really low self-worth, you know, and be really sad about it, and live these kind of lonesome lives. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So, like, if you need to, I love that you mentioned breaks. Oh my gosh, breaks. Oh, I love it. It's like a nap. Like, you take a nap, you're like, oh, but I think like regular breaks are super healthy. Like, you will be forced to take a break eventually, right? If you don't take breaks, eventually you'd be like, oh, I gotta take a break now or I'll die. Like, you know, screw this, and you throw the computer closed and stuff like that. But taking breaks is really good. Yeah. And it just comes down to self-care and making sure you watch out for yourself. Like, the numbers will be there or not.
Yeah.
I could totally empathize with what you're saying. Like, you know, it can be career suicide. Like, if you just disappear. And I've seen people do that. They just are gone one day. And I hope they're okay. But like, they can be okay away from the internet. That's fine. But I hope they're okay as people. But obviously, if you don't want to get to that point, then take care of yourself. You know, think about your own value, you know, and how that's not always connected to the numbers that you get, because numbers will be, you know, up and down.
Yeah,
sometimes
they always are.
So, and sometimes it's just that freaking algorithm that just wants to get you down. Like, if you have an enemy, it's the algorithm. That's the real devil right there.
So one thing I definitely want to touch on real quick that I know some people are probably interested in knowing, like, when it comes to working, you know, creating content, like even tying into something like you mentioned earlier, someone asked like how many games they should buy. Like, when it comes to making content, make content on things you have. Something you're looking to pick up, make a content on stuff you already have. If you want
guarantee you got something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want to work with the industry, a couple ways. One, making the content, because regardless of whether you realize it or not, the industry, as big as it is, the people who make the moves, who work with creators, influencers, outlets, and such, there's a very small pool of people, and they do look at stuff that's being made. And eventually, you're going to get contacted by them, or you can reach out to them. You know, I always tell people, like, having a website actually is great. If you're a YouTuber or a streamer and you're covering certain things, have a website, have a portfolio of work. you know, that way you can showcase it, because you don't want to be, and I say this to people who stream, and I think I may have said this on your podcast too, but you don't want to be loyal to a platform like YouTube or
Yeah.
Twitch or something like that. Because if you call yourself a YouTuber and YouTube goes away, what are you?
Yeah, right. That's not your
You know?
identity. It's
Right.
something you do.
Right.
There's another part of like the self-worth equation. Like if tomorrow you could not write reviews anymore,
Mhm.
what are you? You're not a game reviewer anymore, but you're still you.
All right. So it's like, consider it like accept the role of being a content creator, because it's multifaceted. You can define it as you need. Make content on stuff you care about, written, video, or podcasts. Having a website is essential. Establish relationships with, and I'm not saying be best friends with the people,
Right.
but establish a relationship with the press or the public relations people that are providing you or have the capability of providing you a code. Like, reach out to folks. I know folks that constantly ask me, like, how do you get to work with PlayStation? How did you get to work with this company or this? And I'm like, I reached out. No one told me. I just use Google, the ultimate catch-all tool.
There you
I
go.
was and then I've gotten to know a lot of folks. I've met a lot of people, and really, it becomes a series of separation at that point, because when you start building a good reputation and people start noticing that you're very consistent, again, this goes back to longevity. You will get people that will continue to support you. Like, case in point, there was a tweet Michael Kiritaze put out for this survival horror game, that it's a psychological horror game. Put it out on September 7th. I responded on the tweet, said, aloha, my name is Mekel Fontea, aka Mekel Kasanova, Hawaiian content creator, all this stuff. Here's my media deck, which is another thing that's important. Have just like having a resume. And I gave him my email address. And then I had the senior public relations guy, Ibrahim Badi from Square Enix, comment on my comment to the guy saying, hard vouch for this man. Because
that's from building relationships right there.
Exactly. Yeah. So establish these relationships, establish a work ethic, be consistent, and I'm not saying drop a single video every single day or an article every single day, but like, have a level of consistency. If you'll be consistent in going to work or going to the gym or whatever your daily routine, fit your content into there in some way. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like I did a podcast recently with my friend Black Honey. And one of the things that we were talking about was like how when we got started doing content on YouTube and Twitch, like people were saying you had to have this, you had to have a DSLR camera, you have to have an XLR mic, you got to have this, you got to have that, you have to have the lights and all this other stuff. And you see a lot of people who are successful don't have all that, because you don't need all these unnecessary things to be successful. You just need your mind, your creativity, your desire and drive, and you got to push sometimes beyond your comfort level. So yeah.
Yes, 100% agree. And I hope that helps people. Like a lot of people struggle with this. It's a lot of people, for a lot of folks, is a hobby, and that's great.
Yeah.
Putting out a couple of reviews here and there, that's wonderful. They're like, we need hobbies in our lives.
Yes.
If you want to get into it professionally, be professional. That's it.
Yes. You have to treat this like a business. When you want to do it professional, it is more than just hitting record and go or go live. It's more than just, writing up something and not proofreading it. There is a whole business aspect to this that a lot of people don't see, and a lot of people, even folks that are in it, they sometimes they just don't get it or they can't grasp it. But it's very much treat this with the respect you would treat any profession. You know, is it viable? It's more volatile than most jobs, but then I mean, we're seeing now jobs are letting people go left and right.
Yeah.
You know, so stability is really up to you.
Right. And diversify. There's one thing that I think is helpful with stability. It's something that I'm trying to do myself so that I don't just rely on just this website. So I don't rely on just streaming, you know, just podcasting. But there's so many tools available to do anything that you want to right now. Again, don't blow out your budget. You don't have to go out and buy 1,000 Steam games. Don't go out and buy, you know, the latest microphone and camera setup. You know, you're not taking pictures for like a magazine. Like you're just recording yourself in front of a camera. I mean, I've seen people get hits for recording themselves off a cell phone.
Yeah.
If the content is engaging and compelling and the storytelling is there, you don't care if it's on a cell phone. You know, it's the content that speaks for itself. So
exactly. So anything else you want to pick up?
Man, I think we hit that nail pretty hard. I don't know, like what else could we add to that? I would just say follow your dreams. You know, like there's a lot of instability in the world. There's a lot of, you know, cruelty online and things like that, but you could do anything you want to do.
Yeah.
If you, and not like anything if you just set your mind on it. No, like not like in a cheesy sense. If you dream it, do it. You know, you could do it. You could do anything you want to do. Just find the time, find the resources, find the drive, and be consistent.
Anything you want to leave the audience with before we go outside of that gem that you just dropped? That might
I don't know. Like, look, we've got this big website. All right. Like you said, industry people listen to this, right? If you want to collaborate, contact me. We've got a lot of different writers. We're always looking for new writers. We handle new game keys. We handle old game reviews. We're doing interviews. We're starting up this YouTube channel. I'm streaming through things. We've got a lot of written content coming. I have secret projects that I'm not allowed to tell anybody about, but they're super secret. So there's a lot of stuff going on. If you want to work with a group that has a lot of diversity, reach out to me. I can send Mekel my email. I'm sure I don't need to say it here on the air, but
I'll put it in the
put it in there
in the description too.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks very much. No, it's the Well Red Mage at thepixels.com. The Well Red Mage at the-pixels.com. Email me if you want to talk. I'll talk to you.
Yeah. So with that being said, that's the episode, people. Links to everything for the Well Red Mage and thepixels.com will be in the description of it, and you'll be able to catch this episode of the podcast along with many others, video format on YouTube as well as on Spotify. Big shout out to Spotify for sponsoring this podcast. Well, both podcasts. And you'll be able to catch it on every other major podcasting outlet. So just look up the Kasanova podcast or look up, you know, Decked Up, a gaming and tech podcast. This is going to be on both because I think we're covering, you know, the industry, the content creator side, and we're talking about gaming and so much more, and it deserves to be on both. So we're going to cross-pollinate. I can do that. I got 4 podcasts. I can do that.
You do what you want. Who's going to tell you can't, huh?
So with that being said, Moses, thank you again for taking time out of your day to come on the show. And yeah, we will see y'all on the next episode.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mahalo for your time for listening to this episode of the Kasanova Podcast, number one podcast in Hawaii. If you found this episode to be incredibly enjoyable, informative, or if there's anything you gain from it, or any insight, or anything that's good that you really, really enjoyed, make sure whatever platform you're listening to it on, or if you're watching it, leave a comment if that's available on the platform, like it, share it around with someone you think would enjoy it, and give us some feedback, because your feedback is exactly what we need to keep this show going. And if you're wondering what are some ways that you could support the show, we got various ways. We've got Patreon, we have channel memberships over on YouTube, as well as Subscribestar, Coffee, and so much more. Links for everything will be in the description of the podcast, so make sure you go check that out. And with all that being said, I hope you have an aloha rest of your day.
Let them know that I'm next level. I'm a whole new kind of guy, yeah. Yes, at the top spot, in case you forgot. We the ones that got the block hot, bullet got the shot. Yeah.